Are you dreaming of making the most beautiful on-trend dress with a draped drop shoulder and pleats along one side seam? Then you've come to the right place. My name is Iben, and in this video I'll show you how you can sew the cool and super comfortable asymmetric dress and blouse Castagnet from Pleated. This dress is at its core quite simple. One shoulder and the opposite side seam are draped with large pleats, which help create shape and a lively silhouette. The drop shoulder detail gives a raw, playful expression and also makes it easy to create a sleeveless blouse version. The neckline sits high at the neck while both the dress and blouse are fastened with 3 buttons along one shoulder seam. You can buy the sewing pattern for the Castagnet dress and blouse on my website pleated.com. In this video I'll demonstrate how to sew both the dress and the blouse, as the construction process is almost identical for the two designs. No matter if you're making the dress or the blouse, you'll need suitable fabric. Choose a light to medium weight woven fabric with no stretch or only a very slight amount of stretch. The fabric should have natural drape and some stretch on the bias, but it can also have a slightly crisp feel, which will help the pleats stand out more clearly. In this example, I'm using a check lightweight viscose cotton blend that resembles seersucker. In addition to fabric, we'll need interfacing. Use a lightweight woven fusible interfacing. We'll also need buttons for the shoulder and, of course, matching sewing thread. The first step is to cut out the pattern pieces according to the cutting layout. As both the front and back pieces are asymmetrical, each piece must be cut in a single layer of fabric. Make sure to place the pattern pieces correctly on the fabric so the grain line is respected. Also remember that both the front and back pieces must be cut from the right side of the fabric, otherwise the pieces won't match up properly in the end. Next, iron the interfacing onto the facings. This must be done no matter if you're making the dress or the blouse. Lay the interfacing piece on top with the resin side facing the wrong side of the fabric. Press with your iron. Overlock or zigzag around all edges of both the front and back pieces, as well as the facings and the sleeves if you're making the dress version. As you can see, my fabric looks the same on the right and wrong sides. In addition, the front and back pieces look very similar. For this reason, I've written a large F for front with tailor's chalk and added a safety pin to mark the right side. I've done the same for the back piece with a safety pin and a large B for back. That should prevent any mix-ups. Start by shaping the pleats along the right shoulder seam on the front piece between the 2 notches on the pattern. On the front piece, you should create 3 to 4 pleats along the shoulder. You decide the size of each pleat and the direction they face. What's important is that the shoulder seams on both sides are the same length. It's easy to check by laying the 2 shoulder seams on top of each other. If there's a difference in length, go back and adjust the pleats until the seams match. In the same way, create between 5 to 7 pleats along the left side seam on the front piece, between the 2 notches. Again, you decide how deep each pleat is and which direction it faces. Personally, I like it when the pleats have a slightly random look. That's why I vary both their depth and direction. Once again, check that the 2 side seams are the same length once the pleats have been shaped. When you're happy with the front piece, do the same on the back piece, but mirror it. Finally, secure the pleats by stitching within the seam allowance about 5 mm from the edge. Find the back facing and lay it flat on the table with the right side facing up. Place the front facing on top, right sides together, and pin along the right shoulder seam. This must be done no matter if you're making the dress or the blouse. On the left shoulder seam, place a pin by the notch that marks the opening towards the neckline. On the facing for the sleeveless blouse, you should also pin the two side seams together. Stitch the right shoulder seam and the first half of the left shoulder seam, remembering to leave the section towards the neckline open. Sew with a 1 cm seam allowance. Remember to also stitch the side seam on the facing for the sleeveless blouse. Bring the facing to the ironing board and press all seams open. This is easiest to do over a tailor's ham if you have one. Find the front and back pieces and place them on top of each other, right sides together. Pin the shoulder seams together. On the left shoulder seam without pleats, you need to once again place a pin by the notch that marks the opening towards the neckline, and only pin along the outer part of the shoulder seam up to that point. If you're making the sleeveless blouse, you can also pin both side seams at the same time. Stitch the shoulder seams, remembering to only sew the first half of the left shoulder seam. Stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. Also sew the side seams on the sleeveless blouse. Bring your work back to the ironing board and press all seams open. Find a small 2 cm wide tape that you've cut from a piece of scrap fabric. Fold the tape lengthwise, right sides together, and sew it together about 5 mm from the edge. Thread a hand sewing needle and secure it to one end of the bias tape. Push the needle through the tape with the blunt end first and use the thread to turn the tape right side out. Cut the tape into 3 pieces, each at least 5 cm long. Now fold each piece into a small loop and place them along the opening on the shoulder seam on the back piece. The loop should face inwards towards the back piece, with the 2 ends sticking out over the shoulder seam. Adjust the size of the loop to match the size of the button. Place the 3 loops with an even spacing. Stitch the loops in place about 5 mm from the edge. Now it's time to attach the facing to the neckline. The method is the same no matter if you're making the dress or the sleeveless blouse. Place the facing on top of the bodice, right sides together, and pin the two pieces together along the neckline. The facing must also be sewn to the opening on the left shoulder seam, but this is done in 2 stages. Push a pin through the facing exactly at the point where the existing stitching ends. Then push the pin through the corresponding point on the bodice. I start by sewing the first section of the shoulder opening down to the pin we just placed. Then I stitch the rest of the neckline all the way around. As before, insert a pin through the point on the facing where the existing stitching stops and match it to the same point on the bodice. Then stitch the pieces together. Press the seam allowance from the neckline towards the facing. With the right side facing up, understitch the seam allowance onto the facing a few millimeters from the edge all the way around. Stitch as close to the 2 corners as possible. Press the neckline neatly with your iron. Now we'll attach the sleeves to the dress. Find the 2 sleeves and match each one to its corresponding armhole. Place the sleeves on top of the body, right sides together, pin and sew the sleeves to the armhole. Bring the dress to the ironing board and press the seam allowance from the armhole towards the body. With the right side facing up, understitch the seam allowance onto the body a few millimeters from the edge. Lay the dress right sides together. Pin along the sleeve and body side seams and stitch the entire side seam as one continuous stitch using a 1 cm seam allowance. For the blouse, we now need to attach the facing along the 2 armholes. Lay the blouse so the right side is facing up. Insert one hand onto the blouse so you can grab the facing from the inside. Turn the facing so it lies right sides together with the blouse. Pull the pieces back out through the blouse and pin along 1/2 of the armhole. It's impossible to sew the entire armhole in one go. Stitch the first half of the armhole with a 1 cm seam allowance. Then reposition the pieces and repeat the process so you can pin along the other half of the armhole. Stitch the second half of the armhole. Clip small notches into the seam allowance along the curved edge of the armhole. Press the seam allowance towards the facing. From the right side, understitch the armhole seam allowance onto the facing a few millimeters from the edge. Again, sew in 2 stages. Press the armholes neatly with your iron. Now it's time to hem the blouse and dress at the bottom hemline as well as on the sleeves. I'll start with the blouse. Press the hem edge 2 cm to the wrong side all the way around. Now I'll show you a cool trick for getting a neat curved hem. Bring the blouse to the sewing machine and make a gathering stitch directly in the pressed fold from one side seam to the other. That is, sew with stitch length 4 and don't secure the stitches at the beginning or end. Then make a matching gathering stitch from one side seam to the other on the opposite side of the blouse. Bring the blouse back to the ironing board. Gently pull the bobbin threads on the 2 gathering stitches to slightly ease in the seam allowance along the hem edge. Distribute the subtle gathers evenly along the hem on both the front and back of the blouse. Finally, press the hem edge another 2 cm to the wrong side, noticing how the gathering stitches help shape the curved hem. Sew the hem in place from the right side about 2 cm from the edge. Now turn to the dress. If you haven't already done so, start by pressing the side seams open. Then press the hem edge 2 cm to the wrong side all the way around. Next, press the hem edge another 2 cm to the wrong side. On the dress, there is no need for a gathering stitch as the hem is straighter. Do the same for the sleeve hems. Press the hem 2 cm to the wrong side. Then press the hem another 2 cm to the wrong side. Stitch the hem in place from the right side about 2 cm from the edge. Stitch the sleeve hems the same way, about 2 cm from the edge. The last thing we need to do is sew on the 3 buttons along the shoulder opening on the opposite side of the loops. And then we're finished. I hope you'll love your new dress and blouse. Remember to follow Pleated on YouTube and feel free to give the video a like. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.